welcome to the Vital Masculinity Podcast. I am your host, Stephen Sawyer, and I'm here with my co-host tonight, Brian Murphy. Brian, how are you doing, man?
Not too bad.
That's good to hear. Well, I think we have a wonderful conversation for you tonight between Brian and myself. And before we jump into that, I have a couple of announcements that I want to cover. The first thing is that if you have not yet checked out our website, vitalmasculinity.org, please do, because there we have show notes, we have other resources that we discussed in the show, and a whole host of other tidbits that we think you will find useful on your journey to becoming a better man. The second thing is we want you to have conversations with us, and to do so, you need a platform. So we have a Facebook group, so you can go over to Facebook and search for Vital Masculinity and join the conversations that we are having about virtue, masculinity, and becoming a good man, becoming a more well-rounded and complete man over there. And the last announcement is a little more cliched, but that we would really appreciate if you liked and subscribed, leave a rating and review, or whatever platform you're listening on, whatever you can do to give us feedback for the show. Because not only does this tell us if we're doing a good job, or in some cases a bad job, we want to hear that feedback too, but it also allows us to reach new audiences. And if you find us helpful, I would hope that other men would find us helpful as well. So please go ahead and do that after the show. But right now, we have a great topic. And Brian, what is the topic we're going to discuss tonight?
We're going to talk about virtue tonight, and what exactly is that, and what do us modern people think about it?
Okay, so, well, what do you think we think about it? I guess that's a good starting place.
Well, to be quite honest, I don't really think we think much about it at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, how often would you say that virtue comes up in the lives of, say, your coworkers on a daily basis?
I mean, you might every once in a while have an ethics training, but I never hear anyone mention virtue. Not at work, not anywhere.
Yeah. And oh gosh, I remember my business ethics classes, and that's ethics, and I'm using quotation marks in the air right now. Yeah, I think there's just not a conversation on it. And there's a conversation on a lot of things today, including on masculinity, as we kind of alluded to in the last episode. In this period of early 2019, there's a whole host of questions and conversations on toxic masculinity. But the question of virtue does not come up. And I think my thought is that it's kind of seen as antiquated in our modern secular world, and the same idea that, say, sin, that word, would be.
Yeah, it's almost like it's probably not quite as bad as sin is, but in some sense, I think it's kind of looked at as what's the word here? Like it's something that you don't really want to hear about, because you're expecting someone's going to come in on their high horse and, shame you because you're not virtuous or something like that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and shame is such a powerful tool, especially in the age of social media. But so, yeah, if we're not talking about virtue, and at least in like a business context, we're talking a lot about ethics. What, in your opinion, do you think the difference between the virtuous man and the ethical man is, if there is one?
That's hard to say, because, I mean, in one sense, there is the concept of virtue ethics, which I think is good, but when people think of ethics, they don't really think of virtue and ethics together. So I guess I guess I'll throw it back to you. What do you think the difference between virtue and ethics is?
I think ethics has to do typically with a codified set of rules, or really more behaviors. Like I'm a accountant, so I abide by all of the rules of being a certified public accountant, and we have to do a lot with ethical training and all of that comes with that. And that's not so much ethics on a general scale. It's ethics typically confined to one particular segment of life. I mean, yeah, we're supposed to carry this ethical training over, but it's still very specialized. So I almost want to say that ethics is a specialized set of codified rules, and virtue is something that's a lot more ingrained in masculinity and being a man, and really just being a person. Because I think you can be a an ethical man that's good, and I think you can be an ethical man that's bad. Would you agree with that?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true because I was just thinking about when you were talking, and I think most cases when they have these ethics trainings or when people talk about ethics, a lot of times it's in the context of, okay, what should I not do? Like it's kind of like
Hmm.
avoiding, like, okay, here's the rule, make sure you don't do this. It's not really so much about what you should do.
Right. Being an accountant is basically here's the one thing you should do, and here's 1,000 ways you can go to jail for not doing that. And I wish I was making that up, but that's basically the case. And honestly, thank God for that. But yeah, I think I think in our modern world, the conversations when it comes to the core of masculinity, I think they're more about success. I think they're more about when we say, who are you emulating as a man? It's the people that have the money, the people that have the fast cars and the beautiful women and the three houses and all of those things. And I think you really see nowadays, the rise of this entrepreneurial spirit, which is good. I think entrepreneurship is good, but I think there is so much just fluff there. And I think it's very hollow. And I don't think that cuts to the heart of what it means to be a man in the
Right.
slightest.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at education, for example, you see, especially when you get closer to the end of high school, you're applying to colleges. Where do you want to go? What major you want to take? And especially when you get into college, it's all about, okay, I need to finish this up so I can get a good job and I can make money. And it's all about like success, like you're saying. It's not
Hmm.
necessarily about what kind of person am I trying to be. It's more about,
Yeah,
do I have the qualifications to get this, to get my foot in the door and start my career.
very career focused. And that's not to say that having eyes towards, I'll say, worldly things, quote unquote, but having eyes towards, you know, knowledge and physical health and relationship well-being, that's not to say it's bad. I mean, Brian, you're not telling people to go live in a monastery and read books on virtue and knowledge all day, are you?
Well, that might not be such a bad idea.
Maybe for some people. I
Yeah.
have some people in mind, but no, like it's I think we're very one-sided today. I think we focus on a lot of external things, and I think that I love the college example that you gave because that is all college is. College is not formative except for really your mind, and I would even dispute that. I don't think college really forms your mind well, but at the very least, it gives you a piece of paper that says you can work. But we have no conception of anything outside of what we can see on the bare surface, whether it's related to the products of your mind, your physical body and those relationships. But being a man, that's so much deeper than all of these externals.
Right. I think, this, I mean, yeah, there's nothing wrong with success, and obviously we all want to be successful. But I think when you look at virtue, like if you have virtue, you will, I think you, in many ways, you will be successful. But if you focus on success, that doesn't necessarily you'll be virtuous. Mean you'll be virtuous.
Absolutely. And I think another important point is that you see, particularly today, the rise of a lot of depression, anxiety, mental health disorders. And they've always been around, and there's a lot of factors that contribute to their rise today, including things like social media and internet usage. People could argue about stress at jobs and economic conditions and a whole host of things. But I think one of the other reasons that no one really talks about because we don't have this vocabulary, we don't have this very readily available data set, is that I think that as we've forgotten the inner man, as we've forgotten the pursuit of virtue and the development of being, I'll say, a good person, a good virtuous person, we're losing that side of us, and by basically atrophying one entire aspect of our body, we're cutting off really the road to happiness, to fulfillment, and that's obviously not the most important thing in life. But I think that if you do pursue virtue, you will very easily achieve a sense of happiness and really more accurately a sense of fulfillment in your life.
Right. So let me ask you a question.
Sure.
If someone, let's say they they want to be successful, or maybe they have they're depressed, or they have some
Hmm.
sort of problem, or they have some mission that they want to accomplish.
Okay.
How often do you think they focus on, okay, what can I do to improve, like, who I am as a person, as part of that mission?
Ooh, that is a very good question. I'll say some of the time. I think it obviously depends on the mission. Um, but I think there are some goals that they do require radical self-examination, radical self-honesty. If you're a man that eats pizza 3 meals a day and weighs 450 pounds, and you want to have, washboard abs, then it's not as simple as saying, I'm going to stop eating pizza. You really need to first look at yourself in the mirror, look at yourself on the scale, and say, this is who I am. And it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt, right?
Well, I mean, you could just go have liposuction or take some pills to lose weight.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so the magic pill option. Yeah, that's I don't recommend that, both the liposuction or the search for a magic pill. And I think that probably gets to the heart of your question. Um, maybe not many people. I think a lot of people are too afraid, to be honest, and I've been there. I mean, there's still times now where I'll be afraid to kind of plumb the depths of my soul or my being and say, you're bad at this. Whether it's something tangible like you're bad at work, or something like you're not a very good person. You struggle with judging people or whatever it could be. But I think people are too afraid a lot of the time, most of the time maybe, to really say, I need to work on myself first.
Yeah, I think so. Let me ask you another question.
Okay.
If Do you think that people look for the easiest way to get to the end, their end goal?
Hmm. Basic, almost like Occam's razor. Uh, yeah, I think I don't think people readily subject themselves to the rigors of discipline, so to speak. So yeah, I think people are probably picking the easy way.
Right. So would that, let's just say, hypothetically, if someone were to,
Hmm.
if that's their focus, okay, I'm going to figure out how I'm going to get to this goal, and whatever's the easiest way to do that, that's what I'm going to do. Do you think that leads to a virtuous life, to growing in virtue?
I don't. And that's because I think virtue is not just a series of actions. You could, let's say, the virtue of charity. You could be a very charitable man outwardly, but inwardly, you could only be doing it for show. So, in that very easy example, you can see it goes very far beyond just the outward actions, and starts to look more towards the inward disposition. And I think something about virtue, and Brian, you may agree with me, you may disagree with me, but I think virtue is something that really needs to be struggled for. And that's probably why it's another reason it's not talked about today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to be honest, I think a lot of growing in virtue is, struggling, failing, learning from your failures. It's not just about the easy path, but like the the hard path is going to lead to more virtue, as you learn from your mistakes, as you
Hmm.
struggle, and you're going to grow a lot more than if you just took the easiest way, which
Right.
a lot of the times you might not even learn anything from it, because you just said, okay, I got what I wanted. I'm not going to really think about how I got there, because it wasn't that hard.
For sure. And I think it's honestly easy to say, as two men that have reflected on this concept probably for 3 or 4 or 5 years together, I think it's easy to say now that, okay, taking the hard path is something that we should do. It may be harder to implement, but it's something that we should at least strive to do. What would you tell someone, or let me rephrase that. For someone that's looking at this, that says, why should I do this? Or maybe for yourself 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, who's asking the question, why should I pursue virtue? What would your answer be?
Ooh, that's tough. I'm just trying to think.
Because that Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what this is about, right? We're sitting here telling men to do things that are hard. And obviously, I think on face value that produces some goodness. Doing things that are hard makes you a lot more resilient. It makes you a tougher man, and that
right.
image we all want to be. We all want to, in some senses, possess that character trait. But I think when we're talking about virtue, and I think we're talking about struggling for virtue, there's a much deeper thing. And you and I could go probably 1,000 different reasons. We could probably go religious. We could probably go, emotional, mental, and physical, and those three aspects of our health. We could talk about success and work. I think there's a lot of things we can go, but I'm interested in hearing your kind of off the cuff answer.
Yeah, I think. I mean, to be quite honest, I think you actually have to start growing in virtue before you actually start to appreciate why you would want to do that.
Ooh.
Because I think that just thinking back, like 3, 4 years or however long it was when before I even started thinking about this, um, I mean, this wasn't even on my radar. It was not even something that I was, didn't even think I needed. And now just fast forward, like it took a lot of struggling, it took a lot of confusion, it took a lot of failure, and really taking time to reflect on who am I, who do I want to be, and how am I going to get there. And that's kind of the only way I was able to recognize that I want to grow in virtue, which I guess maybe we should kind of define at this point what virtue is. What's your definition of virtue?
Ooh. I I think virtue is is a collection of habits. And ooh, that may not even be the best place to start. I think virtue is a collection of habits that can free us from, I'll say, the passions. And that's a very Christian, it's also a very Aristotelian and kind of Greek philosophical term for, I'll say, the things that can control us, like your lusts, your vanity, your pride, the quote unquote seven deadly sins. But virtue is the collection of habits that allows us to free ourselves from these passions and orient ourselves to the good, the true, and the beautiful. And for me, as an Orthodox Christian, that would be God, that would be Christ. But for people that may not be religious, I don't know if I can answer that question for you, but I think you could find something to orient yourself to that's good, true, and beautiful. So, flipping that around on you, sir, what would your definition of virtue be?
Yeah, so I think that's I would say something similar, but I guess I might
Hmm.
qualify it a little bit. I would say the virtues
Okay.
are good habits. So we can have
Ooh.
habits, but they might not. They could be bad habits. I think everyone probably has bad habits that we're trying to get rid of or we're trying to transform. So it's definitely got to be a good habit. And I would also say that when we think about like our passions for things, like a lot of times people think of that as a good thing, and I think it can be a good thing if it's
Oh,
directed
for sure.
in the right direction. So I would say it's it's a it's a good habit where you're able to live in such a way that kind of your mind is you understand what is good, and you're able to freely live that way. You're able to, and even more so, you actually desire to live that way. So you know what the right way to live is, and you desire to do that. So it's I would say you even have a passion to live that way.
Ooh, I like that. And I think this kind of goes back to the conversation from a few moments ago, where really the idea of virtue is planting seeds. You may not realize ahead of time why you're undertaking the quest for virtue, why you're walking on this journey by yourself or with other people. But I think if you have trust that if you plant the seeds in the spring, you will be able to reap the harvest in the fall, then you'll be able to actually begin that walk. And as you said, Brian, you'll be able to appreciate not only where you end up, but the journey as well.
Right. Absolutely.
So, yeah, so that's virtue. And I think you guys could potentially come up with different definitions of this very, I'll say, big word that we've been using a lot tonight and will continue using a lot. But at least for us, this is what we use to define kind of this journey that we're on. And I think one of the last reasons we should probably discuss why we're pursuing virtue are the personal reasons. So Brian, why are you personally pursuing virtue? Why do you think it's worthwhile for you?
Oh boy, there's so many reasons. I mean, I think I kind of mentioned this last time, but if you just look at the way that our society is right now, like for example, politically, people are very, emotional. They're very passionate about it, but we're also very divided. And I think that kind of stems from the way community life has kind of transformed over the past probably 50 years or so.
Sure.
A lot of times I'll walk down the street, like someone walks past me, I don't say anything, they don't say anything. It's almost like we're not even like neighbors or anything like that. So, and I'm just thinking the last place I lived in an apartment building. I don't think I knew more than like one or two people in the whole building. And it's kind of crazy to think that all these people are living together, and yet we have not formed any sort of community. And obviously, those are extreme examples, but I think the point I'm getting at is that I want to. I want to see that change. I hear stories about the past where you have these tight knit communities where families are, together. They're loving to each other, and sure, nothing's perfect in the present or probably in the past either. But that's something I want to strive for, is to have strong families, strong communities, and I want to help contribute to that. And I think in order to do that, you have to start with yourself, and I think that's where virtue comes in. I want to be a good man so that I can, find other good men, that we can build up good men, and as that adds up, you're going to have society and your community are going to be a whole lot better than what we're looking at right now.
And I definitely agree with that. I think that was a very large part of my journey as well, and my reasons for beginning to study and really work at my own internal journey to virtue. Um, I think the other thing that I would add, and this is just for me personally, is that I'm a young man. I'm in my mid 20s, and as I graduated high school and college, I had a lot of the kind of the worldly success that we talked about, in terms of grades and really grades, since that's the only thing I was really working on that time. But as I began to transition to, I'll say, quote unquote, adult living, having a job, looking at settling down, finding, a woman to marry, all these things, I realized how listless and aimless I became. And if you
Mm.
really aren't orienting yourself and your life towards something, and for some people that could be externals like going to the gym, it could be hobbies and things like that. But I think that there's a much deeper level to get to than that, because I spent my time on a whole host of hobbies, from arts to reading. I'm still a very big reader, to working out, to running, to being a whiskey connoisseur, an amateur whiskey connoisseur, I should say. But you can explore all of these different pursuits, and you can find a lot of happiness and success and fulfillment. And you really should have these hobbies. You really should have these goals that drive you, that give you a purpose for waking up in the morning. But at the end of the day, there will come the time when you cannot run anymore. You cannot work out anymore because your ankles are too,
Mm.
shoddy, or you can't read anymore because your eyesight's gone, or, for whatever reason, you could get hit by a car tomorrow, and that's it. And because of that, I think that there's something that's much deeper when you really think about it and you really reflect on what it means to live. And
Yeah.
and for me, true living is not just accumulating money. It's not just accumulating titles. It's not just accumulating a list of hobbies. and becoming, the Renaissance man. Because Renaissance man's a good goal, but if that's all you're looking at, the externals, I think you're missing a lot, and I think you won't find peace. I don't think you'll find your complete happiness, and that's really why I'm on this journey as well.
Yeah, that's, now that you mention that, I can totally see myself in how you describe, what you went through. And I imagine that a lot of our listeners probably, they can relate as well. I'm
Yeah,
just thinking, I got out of college, you're, okay, now what? Like, I don't have to go to classes. I don't have to, I don't have a program that I'm following that I need to complete. It's kind of like whatever I want to do as long as I go to work. But yeah, you think about you want to get a girlfriend, maybe get married, have a family, or whatever it might be. And you go around and you say, okay, what are some fun hobbies I can do? I'll do rock climbing because, that's really extreme and pretty awesome and it's fun, but I'm sure the chicks dig that. Or, but yeah, you just go around, you're trying to accumulate all these things and yeah, they're fun and maybe they improve you as a person, you learn skills and you make good friends, but I think like you're saying, after a while, it's like, okay, I've done 20 different hobbies and they're all fun, but is there anything else to life? And
yeah,
I think, you can accumulate all these sorts of experiences, possessions, but when it comes down to it, like at the end of the day, at the end of your life, like all you're going to have is who you are. And,
absolutely.
who is that?
I think, as we've said 1,000 times, all of these externals can be good. We don't want you to give up, good grades. We don't want you to give up searching for promotions and learning these things so you can provide for yourself, for your family, and so you can really make a difference externally on your bubble of the world. But at
Yeah,
the end of the
absolutely.
day, at the end of your life, the crowning achievement, if you so choose to pursue it, is going to be a virtue. You are the person that can, mold your own body, but the crown, the ultimate goal, the thing that really molds you together and makes you the man that you want to be, or the man that you really should be, that your ancestors would want you to be, that your fathers and forefathers would want you to be. That's the pursuit of virtue, because no one can take that away. And that is going to be what people remember you by.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at the cardinal virtues, for example, which I think we're going to talk in the next episode.
Yes, sir.
Prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. I mean, you look at all those things, and if you have those things, if you develop those things in your life, you're going to have great friendships. You're going to be successful. You're going to, have hobbies and have a satisfying life. And all those things are great. But when those things are the main focus, you can miss out on virtue. And what we're saying is we want you to have both.
Yeah. Well, I think we are about getting to the ending, but before we wrap things up, we don't want this to just be, a conversation where us two are talking back and forth and you're listening to us. Again, this isn't a lecture. This isn't a series of just abstract talks and abstract ramblings. We want to provide some actionable steps because if you don't leave this podcast with, steps that you can take on your journey or that you can use to inspire other people, other men on their journeys, then we're really wasting our time. So Brian and I have come up with the concept of the daily deed. And at the end of each or maybe most episodes that have tangible discussions like this, we're going to provide one of these daily deeds that we'd like you to do every day. In between now and the next episode that will help you grow in virtue or become a better man. So Brian, what is today's daily deed?
Yeah, so this episode's daily deed is pretty simple. Basically, what we're going to ask you to do is take 2 minutes every day and just think about what we discussed in this episode. What does virtue mean? What has your kind of concept of virtue been up until this point? What do you think other people think about virtue? And would you say that you're a virtuous person, or how might you look to grow in virtue? And so do that for 2 minutes every day through the next week. And maybe for a little bonus, if you want, find someone and just ask them those questions and see what they think. Start a little discussion.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. It's going to be a lot easier if you have a brother in the same way Brian and I have helped each other on our journeys. But 2 minutes a day, I think, and I trust that all of you men can do that if you so choose to. Well, thank you again for listening to our show. Please visit our website, vitalmasculinity.org, for the show notes and other resources for a recap of the daily deed, as well as other things that are applicable to your journey. Visit us on Facebook and join the conversation about what it means to be a virtuous and more complete man. Leave any comments or questions you may have, and leave us a rating or a review. And this is Vital Masculinity signing off. Remember, virtue makes the man. Goodbye.